Hello and welcome to Full Colour Celluloid. I'm Led Sharp and I finally found a film to kick off the playlist with, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I found Volume 1 in a second-hand bookshop down Bowl Street for $3.99 and of course I bought it. I had read a few issues of this a long time ago when it first came out. It's one of those books I've been meaning to read for a long time. Finally got round to it and I thought, you know what, let's do a compare and contrast between this and the movie. So I will be doing a review of the comic in 4-colour alchemy. Now, I got a lot of my information for the film from Oliver Harper's channel. What he doesn't know about films ain't worth knowing, and I'm going to leave a link to his channel down below. Go check him out. And I am fully aware of some of the controversies regarding this film. Let's face it, two of the people involved in it, the director and Sean Connery, decided to retire and never work again in Hollywood. It's completely understandable. But the film really is one of those that if you find it on a Sunday afternoon while you're channel hopping, you do in fact leave on. As a film, standing alone from the source material, it's alright. It's a bit of fun. It's a decent action film with a wonderful premise behind it. So I didn't find it offensive as some of the more hardcore fans did. It's an acceptable film, if not a good adaptation. Anyway, let's see what happens when I apply the 4-colour celluloid formula to it. Alan Moore wrote a Victorian-era Justice League in 1999 and Kevin O'Neill produced the art. It was called The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. The film producer called Dan Murphy thought this was a wizard idea and threw money at Stephen Norrington to direct a movie that, along with From Hell, would piss Alan Moore off enough to disown any future adaptations of his work. Now, does the film adhere to the source material? Superficially, it adheres to the basic premise, a collection of literary characters brought together close to the turn of the 19th century to fight a mysterious villain hell-bent on turning the world against itself. But where the far superior comic had Wilhelmina Murray, Mina Harker from Dracula, leading the team after gathering them together at the behest of a mysterious figure known as M, the film has Connery's Quatermain leading the team. Her not leading the team is a slap in the face to the character in the comic, whose authority is a slap in the face of 19th century attitudes to women, and just feels like a lack of confidence in Peter Wilson's ability to act the role. An aside, M also seemed like a nice nod to Sean Connery's beginnings of stardom, as well as a 19th century nod to James Bond, which in the comic is equally compounded by the inclusion of a presumably descendant of Bond, Campion Bond, who isn't in the film, and would have been a more amusing role for Connery despite him being more of a leading actor. Characters and designs are adjusted willy-nilly for the film to tone them down. Hyde is far more reasonable, the Nautilus is far less impressive. It's a thief that stole the Invisible Man's formula, not the man himself. Quatermain is an action man from the start and not an opium-addicted wet Nelly. And characters are thrown in hither and dither. Tom Sawyer isn't in the comic and Mina is a vampire from the get-go. Whole thing feels like they had to cram so many literary nods in that the film looks more like a mosh pit. The plot also strays from the comic, in which H.G. Wells' Carverite is the MacGuffin and not a rather awkward plot about World War I almost happening 15 years early. So comparing what was changed to what needed to be changed and how it all holds together for the sake of a 90-minute PG-13 movie, the comic incidentally would have been an 18 if it was adapted properly, I would give this a 1. I understand they needed to balance the characters a little more. In the comic, the Invisible Man is a rapist and a sociopath, Hyde is a pure monster, and Nemo has a far greater bearing, but it displays a lack of understanding of the source material and a lack of faith in it from Hollywood. That being said, Hollywood is more interested in bums on seats than bums getting the cane, as Moore's weird predilections are not really suitable for family viewing. The production was troubled and it shows. Between floods, dwindling budgets and behind the scenes clashes, Stephen Norrington has never bothered to direct again and Connery retired. The editing hurts some excellent action scenes and the designs lack the sheer flair and vulgarity of O'Neill's hyper-exaggerated Victorian architecture. The effects are early CGI but hold up well enough for the most part, and where the design department is allowed to show off, for example the interior of the Nautilus, the costumes and Hyde's transformation, done as a practical effect, stand out. One issue though is everything feels a little grey and drab. An opportunity has been lost to draw contrast between the fantastic characters and the reality of the times, a mistake other directors of the comic adaptations also make. Other elements really let the side down though, from the aforementioned design blandness to a horrible flock of CGI bats. The script suffers from the inclusion of too many references and characters. Dorian Gray also appears squeezed into the plot, and another nod uses a golden gun similar to a Bond villain Scaramanga. And despite the story flowing reasonably well, the plot feels a bit clunky, especially when it could have been so much more when compared to the comic. There is little character progression due to too many characters. No one feels like they develop naturally despite some nice character beats with Hyde and between Quatermain and Sawyer. The film wasn't trying so hard to please, it could have just let the team breathe rather than go from action to exposition and vice versa constantly for 90 minutes. The design elements and a better plot, there's a few things I would have done personally. Donald Sutherland would make a better Quatermain for a start, but the whole cast pull out performances with what they are given very admirably. Again, altogether, and taking into account the time and crew involved, another one for production values. Coherence. Stephen Norrington has a good eye for direction, but lacks an aesthetic that matches the material. Alex Proyas would have been a superb choice. The story itself would have been better if we hadn't had the comic. In fact, the whole thing would have been better without the attachment. You can feel this film's influence on others, namely 2004's monster mashup Van Helsing, which suffered the same urge to microwave a ready meal rather than slow cook a banquet. Actually flows. The plot is, at least on the surface, cohesive. Everything else is enough to make you leave it on if you found it while you were channel hopping. So 1 point. How did it make me feel? Well, the emotional beats play a decent tune. The action is in places inspired, if a little cluttered. Dante's Hyde and the demise of Dorian are genuine bloody hell moments that are only ruined by slightly dodgy CGI, and it scratches all the itches. So a 1, as you still can't quite shake the corners cut. I did buy the comic, but it was off the strength of it's by Alan Moore and better than the film. But I did buy the comic. I did buy it second hand, so a 1. So pretty much 1s across the board, to be fair, so a flat 6. Really average, but compared to some, enough heart to enjoy. The British cast are strong, Connery is good, the action and plot move at a fair clip, but if Hollywood had had any guts, they would have released an 18-rated movie better suited to the source material and the director's talents. So there you go, a solid 6 out of 12, and it is a 6 out of 12, not a 6 out of 24, which is a weird mistake I made when I came up with the rules for this. I, for some reason, got the maths wrong and thought it would be 0 to 24 when it came to the scores. Anyway, beside the point. The maximum score that it could get is 12, this got a 6, it's exactly an average film, which is exactly where I expected it to be perfectly honest with you. It got enough elements from the comic book right to make it an obvious adaptation. Mina Harker's in it. There are some visual flares. Her red scarf, for example. Hyde, whilst not as bestial as he is in the comic, is certainly a big, angry, monkey-looking guy. And the simple fact that they did all that with prosthetics is actually spectacular and hellishly impressive. I understand why they toned it down. I feel it's a shame that they did, and these days they may have thought about going with the hard R rating for it, to be perfectly honest with you. It's one of those films that I do feel could be adapted again, made better. And I do think that even though he's probably past it now, Donald Sutherland would have made a superb Alan Quatermain. All this is beside the point. It's never going to happen. I really hope that nobody's making a TV show of this. I really do. God, watch this now, announcements to be made. There's probably something that I've missed somewhere in comic book resources or something. Anyway, all that's beside the point. I hope you enjoyed this first episode. I hope it made sense. I thoroughly enjoyed making it. It has in fact been a dark and stormy night. No cliches needed. And stay safe and have fun watching comic adaptations.